to today's episode of The Truth in This Art Beyond, and we're in Philadelphia. And I'm excited to welcome my next guest, an abstract artist who uses art to explore the nature of emotion and encourages viewers to perceive their own internal reality through the use of abstract paint scrapes, line art, neurographic doodles, and Zentangle patterns. Please welcome Ayiana Viviana. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
You didn't expect it to be that sparse, probably.
No.
It just goes right into it's like, oh,
okay.
Did he start?
That's okay.
He did. So again, welcome you to the podcast, and thank you for agreeing to do this. And before we get too deep into the conversation, where I start asking you all types of questions about your favorite color combinations and whether you like ice cream or not. I want you to share a bit of your story with us. And if you will, could you include some of your earliest memories with art and really what inspired you to explore the nature of emotion through abstract art?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, I want to say before I answer your question, Rob, thank you so much for having me. It really is an honor and a pleasure to be here and to be dialoguing with you. So a little bit about me. I am a Latina. I'm so proud of my cultural background and my heritage, and it's a really important part of who I am. Some things that I think are important to know about me is a lot of my identities and who I am is, how can I express it? It's based on or influenced by me becoming a teenage mother. And so that's a really big part of my story and who I am. I am a mom and a wife and a bunch of other things. But beyond all of that, I'm just a creative being. And as far as my earliest memories of art, I was 8 years old. That's my earliest memory of me creating something artistic. And I remember there was this really huge, maybe 16-inch long, but maybe 12 inches, construction paper. Yeah. And I was in school and I had to write a story. And my mom had kept it, but I think she threw it away at some point. I wish I still had it, but it was a story that I was writing. And writing has actually, it was kind of like my first love, creatively and artistically. Yeah. But that was the first time that I remember ever doodling and drawing. And I did the illustrations for this little story. And I know there was a fox in the story. I don't remember all the details. But that's my first memory as an artist, as doing something creative. Interestingly enough, as a kid, I didn't have a television. So I was growing up in North Philly, no TV. Books were the only source of entertainment I had outside of my very religious, strict, home and upbringing. And it was an escape for me. So that's why words have always been my love, my first love. What was the second part of the question that you asked?
So in the inspiration to explore the nature of emotion through art, let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, of course. So that's a good one because like I mentioned, I've kind of always been I've always been a very expressive person through words. And so writing, at one point I remember wanting to write a book. And so writing was always kind of my refuge. And it was how I processed so much of the things that I experienced in my life. And more recently, and literally maybe since this past summer of 2022, I realized that I needed something else because exploring my own emotions and processing in the way that I had been doing seemed to be less effective. I don't know if it's a thing where, I've been doing this for so long. I have journals from back when I was a little girl, and still journal, very frequently to process a lot, but I needed something else. I needed something else that allowed me to be a little bit more creative. Yeah. And I was maybe I can try painting. And I fell in love. And so that's where we are now.
Nice. I love that. I like being able to tap back into stuff that I did when I was younger, and just I think it's important, and this is a question that's going to come up later, but I think it's important to explore and put a pin in that because we're coming back to that later. But yeah, I do that when it comes to some of my creative stuff, I wanted to be a comic book artist and writer and all of the things. There's a lot of work that goes into a comic book.
Right.
And as a kid, I was like, I'm going to do all of it because this is something that I like.
Right.
And as I've gotten older, I've moved into writing for a period, writing short stories. And, everyone has some high school story that they were a rapper or what have you. And and even, diving into, drawing and doing comics in a different way. And that's come out of me doing this podcast or doing podcasting rather for the last 14 years. I've been doing it for a while, and just it's opened me up to be I don't have to have one lane that I'm going into. I can try to explore and convey different things, different feelings, different thoughts through that medium. So I wanted to revisit because I don't think that if we stop something for a period of time, some of the thinking and the ideas that go into it is still there. You don't really cut that part of yourself off. It's still there. You might just explore it differently.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. And, that's the thing. I think that there are some people who, I can't generalize, but for myself, I know that everything that I go through and everything that I process, I find some way to make it creative because I feel like that's just the core of who I am. Besides all of the other titles that I have and all the other things that I do, I'm just a creative person. I see the world creatively. I want to express myself creatively, and I'm constantly looking for creative ways that I can express something to help other people see things that might not be clear, if that makes sense. That's a big part of why I create,
So thank you. And so in going into it, can you discuss a bit about your process for creating your work and how you approach the idea of allowing each piece to have a potential story or potential narrative connected to it, and talk about that a little bit, your process.
Of course. So first I want to say that creating in the way that I am currently with painting is very new to me. And so there are a lot of ways that I'm still refining my style and my process. And because I am a naturally curious person, if I get a random idea, I'm like, oh, let me try that and see how it goes. And sometimes it creates magic. And other times it's like, maybe we'll just, shelf that one. And those things don't bother me because I am very much just open to creating in whatever way and expressing. But I do think that I've kind of refined a bit of a process, and generally what I'm doing now is I'll start with just lines. I learned what neurographic art was, I think, in this past summer, and the idea just would not leave me alone. It was in my brain, and I was like, okay, maybe I just need to try it. I obviously can't stop thinking about this, and I want to experience it for myself. There is an artist on Instagram, and I'm not sure how to pronounce her name. It's KL. I'm not exactly sure if I'm pronouncing it properly, but she is incredible, and she's who I was introduced to neurographic art from. And so her concept was, how she explained it was, you just kind of take paper or canvas or whatever medium you want, and you just draw lines, and you're just free flowing. You're allowing your brain to just kind of dump in that way. And I was going through a really personal, heartbreaking time in my life. And I was like, I need to do this. Again, going back to the emotion, I just needed to process this. And it just seemed really intriguing. So I gave it a try. And like I said, so my processes now start with canvas generally. I do sometimes do pieces on acrylic paper, but I love paint so much that I'm generally doing it on a canvas, and it just starts with lines. And I allow my brain to do what it does. I don't have a rhyme or reason for how the lines are formed. But what's really interesting and what I started noticing once I, began practicing it regularly and consistently is that I could see things. And I was like, wait, this looks like a face, and this looks like an afro, and this looks like, a fish, and this looks like whatever it could be, and that's what's so fascinating to me about the process is that I sometimes do have, concrete ideas of what I want to create. But the lines always set me up. And funny enough, the first time I did a paint scrape, because I was I saw it and I was I want to try it. I did like my outline, my neurographic lines, right? I did that on a canvas and I saw something. I was like, wait, this looks like a woman standing on top of a baby carriage. I can't paint scrape on this one. So I started a whole second canvas to do my paint scrape because I saw something in that first one that just would not allow me to because, when you paint scrape, you kind of, you cover some of what you're scraping over. And I didn't want to cover any of what I had seen. So that's kind of my process now. Like I'll do my lines and then I'll spend some time, not too long, maybe like 5 minutes, and just look at my canvas for a while and see what it's trying to tell me. And then based on what I see, I'll create a story around it. And a lot of the times those stories are very personal. They're interconnected. Like, for example, the one that I saw with the woman standing on top of the baby carriage, I gifted that to my oldest daughter on her birthday, which was December 24th. She was turning 21. And, I had her 2 months after I turned 17. So it was almost symbolic of how her and I grew up together because I was still a baby when I had her. So that's why I was like, no, I can't damage this one. And she was there actually when I was doing it. She didn't know it was for her, but yeah, that's a little bit about my process.
Thank you for sharing that and walking us through that. Folks process, and it made me think a little bit. Been working with this idea of so working out, right? You have to stretch, you have to get warmed up and all of that stuff, or you can pull a muscle, or the workout won't be as effective. I think that there's a way to apply that sort of ideology to creation, to painting, to getting into sort of that zone or what have you. And maybe there's a bit of that with sort of the neurographic like doodles and coming up with the lines or what have you, and coming up with some of the more preparation, more introductory stuff that you're diving into. I know that to get my voice to sound like this and crisp, I might drink tea or something just to kind of get things kind of like right, kind of dialed in. And I know musicians do scales and, things of that nature. And I think it's something like worth really looking at because, if you haven't touched something creatively for a while and then you just go into it just dry and cold, it's like, I don't know if this is going to be good. I don't know if this is going to be right.
Right.
But I think when people talk about that flow state,
Yeah, I can relate to that. I really, really appreciate that thought process because I had never really thought of it that way before.
Flexing that creative muscle. Let's make it happen.
Right.
So in addition to the abstract practice, you're also a photographer. So describe the importance of like creative exploration, because I think it's not always a straight line. And as I touched on a little bit earlier, I thought I was going to be an illustrator at one point, and now I'm kind of in this radio media storytelling space.
Hey, don't give up on it. You can do both. You can do both routes.
This is true.
So I think, so in photography, I think, so a little backstory. I did this project in 2010 into 2011. And it was just called A Photo a Day with my iPhone. And back then it was like iPhone 4, something like that. And I think that that's actually what birthed the love of photography in me. I had a homie who was doing the project and he was like, why don't you try it? Like, you've taken some shots that are, kind of impressive and I think it would be good for you. And so I just started to do it. And what that did was it really made my mind look for significance, stories, and things around me that I could capture with just one shot. And if anybody goes on my Facebook page, they'll find them. Some of them, honestly, I'm not gonna lie, they're kind of cringy to look back now. It's 2012 iPhone 4. You know what I mean? Like it's a little cringy to look back now, but looking at it, that was the birth of me seeing the world in a different way. And I think that has benefited me in so many ways because I now, even, 11 years later, am still looking at the world differently because of that 1 year experience. And so for me, creativity is just, like I said before, it's just such an integral part of who I am and how I see the world. And so in photography specifically, I'm looking for, I used to hate taking photos of people. I was just interested in nature and architecture and, just really images that would kind of provoke you to think a little deeper. Like you'd have to pause and look and be like, wait, what am I actually looking at? And so I developed my eye in that way, but I went to a mission trip in Namibia in 2013 and it was life-changing. I was a photographer for the mission team, and I fell in love with photographing people. And then I came back to Philly and I was like, how can I carry this over? Like, I want to shoot people now. And I started working on a project called Humans of Philly. And the idea behind that was it was inspired by Humans of New York. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Brandon and his work.
I've heard of it, yes.
Yeah, he's incredible. And so it was inspired by that. But at that time, I was very much in like, I want to serve mindset. And what I did was I decided to go out and talk to homeless men and women in the city. And if they allowed me to capture their stories, their image, and then share their stories. And the idea behind that was really just, I want for people to look at these men and women differently and not through the lens of judgment. And if this changes one person's perception on what it means to be homeless and the circumstances that lead to this place, then it'll be worth it for me. But yeah, photography it's a passion, but I feel like it's when it becomes like a business for me, it takes the fun out of it.
No, I totally get that.
Yeah. But I hope, did I answer your question? I'm sorry. I can ramble sometimes. So
no, you're good. You're good. And you did. So yeah. So I got two more real questions, right? I want to hit you with, and again, thank you for indulging. So these questions that I have next are, here's the first one. How do you hope your art encourages the viewers to perceive their own internal reality and understand themselves more clearly? And this comes from this idea, and I think you touched on it a little bit earlier. Sometimes being in conversation with other creatives or people with a creative sensibility, or even people that kind of do similar things that you might do, other artists, for sake of argument, you get something out of it, whether it's something within the process, whether it's something on how one goes about thinking. And even people who listen to this who may not be artistically inclined are like, oh, maybe I can approach this in this way. And maybe I am more creative than I'm giving myself credit for. And it's something that happens there. Something clicks. Talk about that and how, like, your art, you hope your art encourages viewers to perceive their own reality and understand themselves more clearly.
Yeah, of course. So I think for me, art is very telling of who we are as people. And I say that because I have been in rooms where I am looking at a piece of art, especially abstract art. I think it's very prominent in abstract art, but it's not limited to. But you look at something, right? You look at something someone's created, True. And your mind begins to tell you stories about what you're seeing. I think, and this is just my personal opinion, that is one of the beautiful things about art, is that it allows you to tap deeper into your own self. Because when you're looking at it, everything that we do, everything we see, everything we say is our own personal perception. I'm sure you've seen people who look at one thing and see two very different things, right? There's artists who are actually like very skilled at creating pieces like that. And so I think that when I'm creating art, that's kind of what I hope for, because my art is so abstract and there's no clear defined, this is this or this is that. Although I do have some pieces that are clearly defined and you can see them, but they all start in that way. And the ones that are clearly defined is because I saw something and I told myself a story about what I was seeing, and then painted it or, furthered the piece in a way that made that more visible to the viewer, the person observing the piece. But the pieces that I don't do that for, that I don't make clear what they are, I feel like are opportunities for the viewer or the observer to create their own narrative. And in that way, kind of tap deeper into themselves. And I say that because there's times where I'll be creating and like I'll hold up a piece and I see things in it, and I'll ask like my kids, I'm like, hey, what do you guys see? And I'll be like, oh, I see an elephant. I'm like, what? Like, where? Show me. Or they'll just find things that I don't see. Yeah. And so that's always very cool to me to like know that everyone who's perceiving my art is seeing it from their own perspective. And so what they see, I can give it a story, I can, give it a narrative, and it'll make sense with what you're seeing. But I think I like the idea of encouraging the person observing to create their own narrative so that they can dig deeper into themselves and maybe even understand themselves better. And I think that's what art really helps us to do, is to see ourselves more clearly and to understand ourselves more clearly. Whether we're creating or observing, it doesn't matter. I think that's one of the most beautiful functions of art for me.
That's great. I'm in agreement with you. I think it leads to discourse. I think at times, discourse, conversation, and all of that stuff from a more abstract standpoint. And I think that, at times people, like I look at media sometimes, like in more of the like film sense, right? Or even sometimes like albums. It's like, yeah, this is a concept album. I was like, I don't know if it is. I think you're calling it that, but that's not what you made,
Right.
or that's not what
Right.
you wrote as far as like a script goes, or as far as a TV show goes, and things of the sort. And people try to do it retroactively because those are forms of media that are not intended to be abstract. They're kind of
Right,
like
right.
this. There's a certain narrative that has to happen here. There are certain songs and all of that stuff. And when people kind of do something that's a little bit more abstract, there's less funding. It's more experimental in that sort of sense.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm making this because I want to see what, the viewer thinks and what they're getting out of it.
That's the most fun part for me as an artist, is to hear other people tell me what they see. Like, I remember like the very first piece that I did in the way that I'm creating now, my brother-in-law, I posted it on Facebook, like, hey guys, I created something, look. And my brother-in-law, he was like, oh, like I kind of see a disfigured heart in the center. And I was like, wait, what? And then so he showed me, and I was like, oh wow, I see it now. And that was just that was the first moment I had of that, like where I was like, wow, like other people are seeing things in this, and it's kind of cool that now I can see it too, whereas before I couldn't. But yeah, abstract art is so beautiful in that. I mean, like I said, I think that concept can be applied to all sorts of art. It doesn't have to be abstract. I just think that abstract art allows the most freedom for it, in my opinion.
Yeah. I have at this point in my this is 7 years ago at this point, where I had this goal of trying to, because I painted in the past as well, murals and things of that nature as part of teams and so on when I was like a kid. And I wanted to tap back into that. And as I said earlier, you don't really cut off parts of your creativity. And
right.
I'm looking at these paintings that I did, and I have them in my studio right now, like where I'm recording from. And there are 7 paintings in here, and it's the wall that's facing me, so I can see them as I'm talking. And I think, there was something intentional about me doing it that way. I'm realizing it. But as I look at it, I was like, there's definitely a conversation in each one of these that can be had. I wouldn't say. The only thing that I felt like I'm trying to do something abstract was this Aquarius painting that I did that's in my bathroom that I really like. I think in that year, wow. I think in that year, I think I did 10 paintings. Just trying to get back into it and trying to dive into it. And it was very interesting for me at the time, but once it became, and I think you were touching on this when it came to photography, once it became, it's like, now this isn't as much fun. It's more like it's a deadline, and it's, I don't know, it feels more like work. And, the podcast that can turn into that as well, but it's different somehow. Like, I wouldn't say I was good and competent at it. It was something I was very interested and passionate about exploring. And I'm getting the itch to return to it. But as I look at it, I mean, there's one that I'm looking at.
I'm always going to encourage people to go for it. Do it.
That's a great quality. I'm looking at one right now. I remember one of my friends saw it, and I just have it in my old studio. I had a studio apartment, and I remember she came by and she was like, is that a birth canal? Is that money on this picture? What is this painting about? And I was like, nah. What it is she was like, I have a degree in this area. That is exactly what that is. What is this? What's the message here? I was like, I don't know, man. I think it's upside down. But literally it's a conversation I wasn't expecting to have.
Right. Oh gosh.
Yes.
Yeah, no, but that's cool. That again, that just goes to show, like, everyone has their own interpretation. And I think conversations about art are really powerful because it's art is a great connector. You know what I mean? Like you can, I'm very introverted and kind of, I'm a little in social settings, I'm a little awkward, and it's okay. Like I've kind of, I've accepted that about myself, and I'm not trying to actively change it. I can be charming and charismatic when I need to, but it just pulls a lot of energy from me. So usually after a social event, I need like 2-3 days to recover, you know, and to kind of be alone.
You're speaking to the choir now, sister. I'm in the same. It's like, man, it's dopamine
yeah, but I think
dump.
a lot of creatives are like that. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I just feel like in this season of my life, I'm trying to be open to those things, and I'm trying to explore them and not put myself in a box in that sense. Where you know, I know in order to just get my art out there a little more, I'm gonna have to do things that might make me a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And my brain kind of lost track of what I was originally gonna say, so we'll just keep it moving along.
No. I actually have something for that. I've been doing this thing. I've been calling it overriding. I've been overriding any of those things, like towards the end of 2022, like that last 3 to 4 month thing, including Rec Philly, including doing these sort of more public speaking and more moderating sort of things, and reaching out and having conversations with funders. It's really like, yo, I'm showing you my work and taking whatever comes with it, and being very protective of what I'm doing, and being very nervous about getting in front of people and really like, yeah, I'm worthwhile and worth your time and attention and so on. And, you know, it was something very, very scary about doing that, and very humbling, but also at the same time, you know, people in my ear, I always distrust people, you know, which is a thing I'm trying to get out of when it comes to something that I'm doing. It's like, I feel how I feel about what I'm doing. But when someone's telling me, no, you're great, you're doing good work, we like what you're doing and so on, it's like, that's great to hear. But also in the back of my head, it's like, I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm still chasing something. I'm still curious about it.
Yeah. Do you feel like you deal with like imposter syndrome sometimes in that sense? Is that kind of what it feels like?
A little bit, because and I had this conversation recently with an arts journalist, and I was like, yeah, I'm not really of the arts community. And he was like, you are. And he just kept reminding me, he's like, you are though. And I was like, all right, then you're right, bro. You're right. And I think people who see it, they'll course correct you quickly. And it's coming from a position of love. And to the overriding thing, I am looking at like, what am I doing? What's my purpose here? So if it's getting on stage and doing something that's very uncomfortable because I'm shy and all of that stuff, it's just like, I can fake this for probably 40 minutes. I know when that timer goes off. You know what I mean?
Right. You know, internally, like, all right, I got to dip. It's time to go.
So
but yeah, that's a good thing to know, like what your limit is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So that brings me to this penultimate question. I know I said it was 2 left earlier, but now it's 1 more after this. So here's one.
Right.
And I think it's this interesting spot that we're in, where we're in this sort of social media digital age, and we're told to be consistent and all of that stuff. But I think there's a different conversation or a different way of looking at it when it comes to being consistent and creating content versus creating art. And we're creating art. We're not just creating content. It can be confused as that. Content can be a part of it, but we're creating art. So from your standpoint, how can you, like, you know, for the listeners out there, many of which are creatives, artists, entrepreneurs, things of the sort, could you share a tip for how staying, you know, for staying consistent in your creative practice, as far as like, what's your sort of cadence on working on, you know, your work? What is your cadence on social media, things of that nature? Like, how are you being consistent in the flow of your work?
So that's a really great question. I think that what 2022 taught me was to take things one day at a time, but to take it a step further, what it taught me is that if I put forth effort and energy into what I'm passionate about and what I'm creating in my art every day, even, you know, obviously there are days where I sit down and I'll paint for like 6 to 10 hours. But then there's days where I sit down in front of the TV with my husband while I'm watching a show because I need to be able to balance that and spend time with him. But I have my like doodle pad in front of me and I'm still creating art, but I'm also just present with him. And so that might just be like an hour that I have, you know, my pad out, or I'm not really a big TV person. So I do tend to like limit myself on how much television I watch. But yeah, I think that for me, the biggest tip is like one day at a time, and do something every single day that furthers whatever it is that you're looking to create. So if you're writing a novel, then, you know, maybe one day you write 3 chapters and maybe the next day you only write 2 sentences. But the goal is to get to that finish line. And so every step that you take towards that finish line is going to get you closer to your end goal. And because 2022 was a really emotionally like challenging year for me, literally from beginning to end. The year was just filled with a lot. And I generally pick a word for the year, like a word that I want to represent whatever that year is to me. So words I've picked in the past are like, you know, trust or serve or courage, you know, just things that I know I need to grow in. For 2022, I was in such a negative headspace, like in January, that I couldn't even think of a word. And so instead I adapted the motto, one day at a time. And that's literally how I lived out all of 2022. And that's, you know, at the end of the year, I realized, like, especially once I started creating, because once I started painting in like September, I started painting consistently. I gave neurographic art a try in like June, July, end of June, beginning of July. And I think I made like 1 or 2 pieces. But then in the beginning of September, when like some really personal stuff hit me, I was like, I need this. And I started creating every day. And I honestly believe that art helped to save my life, because I was just in a very bad space, and having art as an outlet was life-saving for me. So my tip to people who are creatives, to people who are listening to the podcast, is just to consistently every single day do something that is going to push you closer to your end goal. It doesn't have to be massive. You know your limits. You know what you're capable of. You also know when you're lying to yourself and when you're trying to, you know what I mean? Like kind of cheat yourself. So don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that. No. I appreciate that. No, I appreciate that. And yeah, I relate to that. I felt that, you know. So this one is kind of like almost this is the last real question. It's almost a precursor, the trailer, if you will, to the rapid fire questions.
Okay.
since you're a Philly girl, this is a, you know, Philadelphia related sort of series I'm doing here. From your standpoint, how does Philadelphia grow? Like, as a community, get bigger, more resources, attract more people, all of that good stuff, however you might define it. While, you know, how does it grow while keeping its cultural identity?
That's a great question. I feel like Philly needs more, more people who are actively involved in their communities to, I think for me, I think children are such a big part. You know, children are our future, right? Not to get all Whitney Houston on you, but children are our future. Children are our future. And so I think in a city like Philly, where you see so much violence and crime and murder, it can be very disheartening to be hopeful. And that's something that I've actually been struggling with in terms of like how I view the city, and even having conversations with my family, like, do we actually want to be here? Because I'm like, I've been in Philly for most of my life. I wasn't born in Philly, though. I'm from Houston. I was born in Houston. So for me, it's like, let me just, you know, try to go back home or something and see if I can build a life there. But I think that what it's going to take is just more people being active in their communities, more people offering their wisdoms. We all have something to give the world, all of us. And I don't care if it's in a creative way, in an educational way, in a mentor way, like there's always something that we have that we can serve the world with. And so for me, to answer that question, I think that whatever it is that you have that is meant to serve the world, whatever your purpose is, find a way to give that away for free. Like, you know, I would love, for example, to do a class with young kids with just, you know, canvases and paint, and like, let's just have fun, because even that in Philly, you see like a lot of like the art programs have been like, defunded. And so in schools, you don't have as much, unless you go to like a creative arts school, you don't have access to those things. And because art is such a wonderful way for us to express who we are and to discover who we are, I think exposing children, especially in like, the inner city and like communities where in the homes, parents might not be able to offer those things to their children or even know or feel like, oh, this is something I can teach my kids. For there to be people who are willing to stand up and for there to be more of a, like, we're a tribe. We, you think you hear the quote, like, it takes a village, right? And I think about that a lot because it really does. Like, there's so much that we could give to the people around us, even if it's not on a grand scale. You don't have to go to like a school or a rec center. Like, just do it for kids on your block. You know what I mean? Like, get a couple kids that you see, maybe getting into trouble and invite them in your home and be like, hey, y'all want to create something, and have conversation with them. I think that those are some of the things that, in my opinion, are going to just get Philly to a better place. Because what's going to happen if you don't have that is these kids who are growing up are just going to be so greatly influenced by social media, by the violence, by the crime, by all the negative, headlines in the news. And that's going to become their reality. And our internal reality is so much more important than our external reality. So if we have someone who can guide us in the right direction internally, then we can create change externally.
Well said. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
So now it's that time. It's that time for the rapid fire portion of the podcast. No, you're good. You're good. It's going to be so. All right. So this is the way rapid fire works. Don't overthink them. They're. I got five questions for you. They're all over the place. They may have to do with your work. They may not have to do with your work. And yeah, that's pretty much it. All right.
Let's get it.
So here's the first one. Coffee or tea?
Coffee, 100%, all day, every day.
All right. I'm getting bilingual vibes. What is the most powerful word in your vocabulary, whether it be English, Espanol, what have you? What is the most powerful word in your vocabulary?
Powerful is hard, but I'm going to say my favorite word in English is soliloquy. Like, doesn't that just sound like music? Soliloquy. Soliloquy. It sounds like music. Soliloquy. I love it.
Favorite color combination?
Pink, black, and white.
Just good and plenty, I say.
Like a blush pink. A blush, yeah. Well, no, not like that. That's like a fuchsia pink, like a blush pink, a pretty soft, feminine pink.
Okay. I mean, I feel like I may have worn a suit like that to prom, maybe, that had like that sort of color.
Maybe.
With the ruffled shirt,
I don't know.
I may have had my hair slicked back a little bit when I was telling you about my previous life, when I had some honorarium. I had some Latinx honorarium work going on.
I was going to say, yeah. That sounds real Latin.
Let's see. What was the last thing? I know you said you're not a big TV watcher, so we can swap it. But what was the last thing that you watched on TV?
The last thing that I watched on TV. All right, don't judge me for this. Please do not judge me for this. My guilty pleasure is Married at First Sight, and there's a new season out, and I just watched the first episode last night.
Okay.
Don't judge me.
I'm not judging. I mean, I'm over here.
It is what it is,
I got some suggestions. One of the things that I've been able to do and doing this Philly series is be to connect with people who just, it's a different environment. I'm based in Baltimore, and I got some suggestions on things to watch. So now I'm doing this sort of deep dive into like old Japanese cinema from the 40s through 80s. And I was like, this is great.
You know what I saw recently? One more really quick. I saw Avatar, the movie. And I'm not really a big TV or like movie person, but that movie was art. And I was like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. And anyway.
The Way of Water, right? Yeah, that one.
Yes. Oh my gosh, it was so good.
All right. This one is the controversial one.
Okay.
This is the one that terrifies people because, we don't like our secrets out there. We don't want our secrets out there. All right. What is a weird food combination that you just love? And I wrote an exclamation point behind love. But what is a weird food combination that you love?
Well, my favorite food is octopus. So I feel like just by itself, that's a little bit weird.
Foosball. Yeah.
Pulpo, yes, I love ensalada de pulpo, and nobody makes it like my mom. Like I've gone to so many restaurants, tried it. Nope, ensalada de pulpo is my favorite. But when I tell people that I love octopus and it's my favorite food, they'll be like, "What? Like, what is wrong with you?" Listen, don't knock it till you try it. It's delicious. But when I was pregnant, I used to eat like typical pregnant people stuff like pickles and ice cream and French fries and ice cream. Non-pregnant French fries and ice cream are good, but yeah. That wasn't bad.
You're the one that teed it up. You're the one that teed it up. So now you got a sixth one. What is your favorite flavor of ice cream?
It's a toss up between mint chocolate chip and cookies and cream.
Okay. I have a now almost 30-year rivalry with mint chocolate chip. So cookies and cream, sure, absolutely.
Rivalry? What do you mean?
It's an imposter. It's an imposter ice cream. When I was a kid, I was like, what is this nonsense? I was caught on the green. I was like, this is unique. This looks like a tuxedo I'm going to wear in the future with my hair slicked back.
Okay, but what about the white one? Like the green is just food coloring, but like you can get mint chocolate chip without the food coloring. It's delicious.
It's an
you
imposter.
Ever had like the peppermint swirl like milkshake from Chick-fil-A?
No, I have not. I'm very bland. I'm very bland in that regard. I have sazon in other areas, but I'm very bland when it comes to my
food.
I mean, I like vanilla milkshakes.
Sounds like my husband. Yeah, that sounds just like my husband.
But in terms of ice cream, though, it's butter pecan. Butter pecan is my jam.
That's my mom's favorite. I have a healthy appreciation for butter pecan. Yeah.
I mean, I just got pulled onto it because of the Wu-Tang Clan and the song Ice Cream.
Never heard it.
They have the line "Butter Pecan Puerto Ricans." It's very good. It's a very good line.
I have heard that.
So
that's so funny.
So with that, I want to thank you again for coming on to this podcast, and then
thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And in the final moments here, I want to invite and encourage you to share with the folks where they can check you out, check out your work, social media, website, all that good stuff. The floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so on Instagram, I'm Ayiana Viviana, and it's Ayiana Viviana, because most of the times people do not spell my name properly. But then on there, you can like click the link in my bio. There are links to like upcoming shows that I have going on, and my website where you can view and purchase work, like my artwork. And then I know Facebook is a little like archaic, but on Facebook, I am Ayiana Porter, and I am open and welcome any followers or conversations. I love meeting people. I feel like meeting people online is a little easier than meeting people in person, but I'm open to both. So please follow me, check me out, connect with me, and hopefully we can have some fun conversations.
Well, there you have it, folks. I want to again thank Ayiana Viviana for coming onto the podcast and chopping it up with me. And I'm Rob Lee, saying that there's art, culture, community, feelings in and around your city. You just got to look for them.